does it all mean?
Difficult preaching is posthumous pleasure. Pleasure in preaching starts in the heart. Something that stimulates the music in a measure.
What's up, everyone? Merry Christmas. And as you can see, I'm being festive and wearing my Christmas shirt for today. I know that one's a silly one. But anyways, I wanted to talk to you guys about a little gift I want to give you guys, and that is my opinion, my review on Spider-Man No Way Home. Yes! I finally got to see this movie. I hope you guys did as well. I was just as excited as you are. Trust me. But we're going to be doing this video just a little bit differently. So for the first half, I'm going to be talking spoiler-free. For those of you who have clicked on this video and haven't seen the movie yet, trust me, you do not want to get any spoilers. And even if you did get the spoilers, it's just worth a surprise to see it for yourself. And for those of you who have seen the movie, there are just some things I wanted to discuss, some things I want to get out there, and you know what? If you guys want to share your opinions, please comment down below. That is what the comment box is for. I want to discuss these things like predictions, little Easter eggs, just things that we might have seen, might have not seen, what we may think that this new movie has got to offer for the next 15 years of the MCU. Once again, we have the same writers, same producers, and same director, Jon Watts, returning for the third installment of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Reprising their iconic and lovable roles are Tom Holland, Zendaya, Jacob Batalon, Jon Favreau, Marissa Tomei, Benedict Cumberbatch, Alfred Molina, Jamie Foxx, and Willem Dafoe. When I heard news about this movie getting made, I was like, not really on board with it, only because I know that Sony and Marvel are just going with the same route that they did with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, as well as what Star Wars is doing as a marketing profit, and just juicing out all their IPs for every penny that every consumer and fan are worth. And I was like, I guess. Once I saw the teaser trailer where Doc Ock's arms just leaps out of the broken bridge, I was sold. I was like, yes, I'm gonna watch this damn movie. Even the theatrical trailer just gave the right amount of details and footage that we needed, especially for the audiences and fans, because when we see trailers early, our minds just tend to predict things already. We tend to make our own, results and outcomes of what to expect, and then when the movie finally comes out, sometimes it works and sometimes it just deflates all the tension of being excited or really thankful for this kind of movie. So I do appreciate that Marvel and Sony took the Avengers Endgame marketing route and just gave just enough, just a little bit to work with. And now we're going to dive into the meat of our spoiler-free review, so let's get right to it. This movie was everything I wanted and more. Growing up with all the Spider-Man movies and seeing all the actors take on the Peter Parker role, I wasn't 100% on board with Tom Holland at first. It was great to see him in Captain America Civil War, but part of me was still wanting Dylan O'Brien to get casted as that role, and we got Spider-Man Homecoming, and I still wasn't 100% welcoming because he was so dependent on the Stark technology. He was the kid that just ran away without any consequences, and that was that. He was still a kid. He was still making all these terrible decisions that led him into a lot of predicaments, and I just wasn't feeling it anymore. And I can understand where a new wave of generation of people love Tom Holland, and I was just like, he's okay. Far From Home was a little bit of an improvement, but right here in No Way Home, Tom Holland has earned his title as Peter Parker, and by the end result of this movie, he is the Spider-Man. This movie is a lot darker and a lot more emotional, and seeing Tom Holland's performance as Peter and the way that he deals with the fact that the whole world finds out his identity as Spider-Man, he is just put up against a small corner, and you see him struggle and suffer the consequences, the real world consequences that affect not just him, but his friends and his family that were involved. It's a very interesting transition and interesting development for the character because it almost has parallels to Tony Stark and how he was taking responsibility as Iron Man. Even when Peter was up against the ropes, I really like that our characters of MJ, Ned, Aunt May, and Happy really contributed a silver lining to deal with what's going on. I was a little nervous at how much involvement Doctor Strange was going to be in this movie, only because I kind of didn't want this to be another team up, you know? I didn't want this to be another shared movie like Captain America and Iron Man did Civil War, because this is more of Spider-Man's story. But I really like what Benedict Cumberbatch had to offer in his supporting role. He came in, did what he had to do, and just really gave him a nice balance. There are all these articles and theories about Doctor Strange being the true antagonist of this movie. I have to strongly disagree. If being the adult, if being the voice of reason makes him evil, then every single decision that Spider-Man has made is trash. This movie is kaput. And I like that dynamic between Doctor Strange and Spider-Man and all their decisions and all the obstacles that they end up facing, because it really comes down to what is right and what is wrong, and the morale and the responsibility and consequences they end up having to face that affect not just them, but the entire universe. Now let's talk about some of these returning icons that reprise their roles from the previous universe movies. And let's start off with Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, because seeing him for the first time on screen, that was just breathtaking. I was in shock. I was speechless. I mean, I know that they showed it in the trailer and everything, but it was just so unreal to see him back. As well as Jamie Foxx as Electro, who was my favorite villain out of everybody in the Andrew Garfield universe. And he's glowing yellow in this one, which is kind of strange. You know, he still starts off with that blue tinge, but I find it funny that they do address why he looks like Jamie Foxx and not like his Max character. It's just so silly. Like, electricity just fixed his teeth, apparently, and his hair. And then there's Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin, who was my ultimate favorite Tobey Maguire villain of all time. And to see him back was just... I was just in shook mode. Like, even in the trailer, which we don't get too much out of, I was afraid that maybe they were going to recast him, maybe they were going to use a different rendition version of him, because we do get to hear Willem Dafoe's voice in the trailer. And I was just like, oh, please don't make this such a small thing to just throw away. No, he had a lot to contribute with his character, and as well as everybody. Like, I feel like all the villain characters really had a lot to do in this movie. This wasn't like Star Wars, where they showed off our legacy characters and just tossed them aside. They were a very big portion of the movie. They really propelled the story. They really added a lot of emotion and depth to their characters of where they left off, and coming into this universe, completely fish out of the water type situation. There are some callbacks that don't feel misplaced, and this also includes, you know, some of the lines that they used to say, some familiar attack moves, and I gotta say that at some moments there were a little bit too much dependency of CGI, and it's not what we're used to when you're looking back at some of the creations of Sam Raimi and Mark Webb behind the camera, but looking at them now, you kind of see that they really needed it. Like, there's a moment where Doc Ock touches Spider-Man's nanotech suit, and it kind of adds a little color to his tentacles, and I was just like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I gotta say, I didn't think Willem Dafoe was gonna do this, but the man's like 66 years old, and majority of the stunts that he did in this movie were all him. It was crazy. This movie was more than fan service. This movie was an event. It's a benchmark to the installment of the Spider-Man franchise. To sit in a theater and to hear everyone's genuine reactions of excitement and surprises just was so unreal. It was so unreal to be there, to see the things that you see on screen and be like, wow, for once, the trailers didn't spoil us these things. You know, and a lot of people who were sitting there and have probably watched the movie already, they weren't trying to scream or jump out to the fact of what they were already expecting. If you thought Avengers Endgame was an experience, this is on another level. And I cannot say no more without you guys having to go experience this movie for yourselves. Alright, well, that was my spoiler-free review for this movie, and I'm going to give you guys my grade in case you guys are going to click off. I'm giving this movie a solid A. Alright? An A. All right, we're going to dive into some spoilers for those of you who have watched it. We're going to be doing some discussions, some Easter egg stuff, some details, predictions of where this movie is going to take us. And for those of you who haven't seen the movie, this is your warning. All right, the worst kept secret in Hollywood. And as far as the trailers are concerned, we actually got to see Sandman and the Lizard, which don't really add too much for me. Like, I could probably care less that those guys were in this movie, but they are, and they contribute like just a good amount of supporting performances in this movie. Now, seeing that there are 5 villains in this movie, we were really close to getting a Sinister Six, and I've been excited about that news since Amazing Spider-Man 2 when they set that whole thing up, and then we never got it. But I am truly, truly excited to see these 5 villains just take on Spider-Man and just seeing their humanity side, seeing how they were very reasonable with Peter Parker, and just seeing like their side of the story, seeing where they fall amongst the fence and why the conflict has led to where they are, especially towards the ending. I mean, if you do want to consider this a Sinister Six movie, I do feel like the 6th villain was J. Jonah Jameson. And it's because he was always just on the news and just talking so much shit about Spider-Man and just slamming him down, beating a dead horse at his worst. Just, the man was evil. I am actually a little bit disappointed that we didn't get more Jameson, but I mean, he was good for the role he was given. Now, I have to address one of my biggest problems about this movie, and it's because I did not like some of the editing choices. And this has to stem off from how Hollywood was trying so hard to keep this movie a secret, and to bring in all those actors all at the same time would have really raised a lot of questions a lot faster. In many of the scenes that the villains are all in the same room and, you know, interacting with each other, especially with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, it just didn't feel real. Like, it felt like they did all their little tidbits and there were all these little cuts to intersplice that they were having a conversation with each other when they really weren't. It felt really off. Especially after the appearance of Green Goblin, does Norman have a little bit of a, you know, inner demon type conversation with his mask and the inner Green Goblin, and then they don't really work the camera right. It was just boom, there's his face. I mean, this is Willem Dafoe. Just work the camera and give him that theatrical like return appearance on screen, you know, just move the camera up, pan it up slowly, and boom, it would have been awesome. But no, they just kind of throw it his way. And then when they do the whole cure situation towards the end with Rhys Ifans and Thomas Hayden Church, where their human characters come out from, you know, the Sandman and Lizard and, you know, their monstrous looks, like they use the same exact cutscenes from Spider-Man 3 and from The Amazing Spider-Man and just reworked it. Like, it was a recycled scene. Like, they totally Michael Bay'd those moments. And then part of me was thinking, did they only get Rhys Ifans and Thomas Hayden Church to do voice work, and then they just CGI'd them the rest? I mean, that's really unfortunate. I mean, I can only see why Alfred Molina, Willem Dafoe, and Jamie Foxx were the only ones called for an interview. And then there's a cameo in the movie, which was very brief, but it was the first time that the whole crowd was just in shock and awe that I just couldn't hear his lines. And that is the appearance of Charlie Cox reprising his role as Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil. Yes, the Netflix Daredevil. And he plays Peter Parker's lawyer. And it was just great. It was such a great little tidbit. And the one that everyone was waiting for, and to this day, I give them so much props with trying so hard to deny and deny and deny of their involvement in this movie, but it was the internet's and just the fans of Spider-Man, like a freaking wet dream of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield coming into this movie and finally sharing the action with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. These guys were not the sprinkle on the cake, they were the icing. And what I'm talking about, what I'm trying to get at, is that these guys added so much to this movie, and they even had their own scenes. I also really enjoyed that when they first come up on screen, that Ned's mom starts talking Tagalog throughout the whole thing, and just they didn't even bother giving her subtitles. They just had to explain it to like Andrew and Toby of what she's trying to say, and then I thought that was so funny. But yes, going back to where Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, and Tom Holland finally meet, I really love how much emotional weight this adds to their characters, especially when they're talking about what Uncle Ben meant to them, and especially with what Tom Holland is going through, because, you know, Aunt May ended up dying, and, you know, she spits out the "with great power comes great responsibility" line, and it was just so heartbreaking. And to see them really share that moment of grief with him, and as well as, like, you know, how complicated their love lives are, and how Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker lost Gwen Stacy, and just them realizing that they have made mistakes and they just can't let that override themselves and become a villain versus the hero that they set out to be. Especially some of the comedic moments between them, like before, when they're getting ready for the big fight, and especially after the big finale. Like, those three work so well together. It's just the way they kind of go back and forth, just the chemistry. I just want to know how they even had the chance to write these characters. Every debate, every topic, every goof or plot hole that was discussed between you and your friends, or Spider-Man fan slash MCU nerd, they're all addressed here. I mean, one of them also involves of how, you know, Tobey Maguire's back is all broken all the time because he had a little bit of a dry spell with his web slinging, and now his was a little more natural than the other guys because they made theirs. And this also goes for the villains, and then poking fun at how those little accidents made them the menaces they are towards Spider-Man and their whole beef with each other. And then there's the big showdown at the Statue of Liberty, and just seeing how the Spider-Man characters are just hyping each other up, and like Andrew Garfield's like, "Man, I love you guys," and just seeing the way how he had a little bit of a redemption arc, because MJ ends up falling down just the way that Gwen Stacy did in Amazing Spider-Man 2, and then he rescues her, and that is just so sad to see the fact that he redeemed his guilt. There's also that scene in the trailer, I think it was like the international Brazilian trailer or whatever, where we got to see a little kind of CGI goof about Lizard getting his ass kicked, and then everybody's like, "Man, they CGI'd that out. There's got to be the three Spider-Men facing off those three other villains all at the same time." And you know what? It was confirmed. That was that, and I love the way that shot looked. And then Tom Holland is like saying how, you know, all three of the Peter Parkers are just so used to being the one-man show and fighting on their own. And then Tom Holland's like, "You know, I know these guys called the Avengers, and, you know, we learn to work as a team." And then Toby's like, "Who the hell are the Avengers?" But seeing our main three Spider-Man characters work together was just so unreal. It was insanely good. And I'm talking about a lot more satisfying than Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and I love Spider-Verse. We got to see Andrew and Toby just come in with a rematch of their previous villains in the past movies, as well as Tom Holland kind of seeing that Green Goblin is now his real nemesis of this movie, because he killed Aunt May. He killed Aunt May using the freaking glider the way he died in the very first Spider-Man movie. And this is a really interesting and intense moment where Peter Parker's character is just completely changed. Just the way that he goes after Green Goblin and just throwing all that punches, it was just so brutal. And to see him fight Goblin just in hand-to-hand combat was so crazy. Speaking of which, Goblin's just final transition, like, I was a little upset that they broke his mask. Well, he broke his mask. And then he decides to just be faceless Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe. Thankfully, he didn't look like the Hobgoblin in Amazing Spider-Man 2, but it was Willem Dafoe's performance that really sold it. And then he got into his full comic book attire. Like, I'm talking about, he looks exactly how he did in the comic book, but it's Willem Dafoe, and it's his performance. And seeing the fact that all of our characters, especially the villains and our heroes, really stayed truthful to the source material was just so appreciative for the fans and for the moviegoers as well. I think I meant to say the word faithful. Doctor Strange, I gotta say, I love that interdimensional chase scene he had with Peter Parker, and especially where he's referring to the multiverse and how seeing how the world was kind of like breaking, how the different universes were just starting to mend together. And if you could see along the lines where the rift was happening, you could see really carefully, and it happens really quickly, but you could see the true Rhino with the suit and everything. You could see Scorpion, but it's like a mechanical type Scorpion, which was like a weird choice. And then there was Kraven. And Kraven is actually getting his own movie, or either that or he's going to be like in Spider-Man 4. But that's going to be played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. I can't wait to see that one because I don't know. I'm not a big on the comic books, but Kraven just sounds like a badass character for Spider-Man to go up against. And then towards the ending, we get Tom Holland's Spider-Man and his decision to erase everyone's memory of him, including his loved ones. And when he goes into the shop and he sees Ned and MJ just living different lives, not knowing who he is, and he's thinking that, yes, he's going to jog their memory back and they're going to kick back up to where they started. And knowing what he's done, knowing that he will put them in constant danger because of the choices that he made in this movie, he decides to back off and live alone. And it was such a very downer part of the ending. Like, it was very unfulfilling to maybe say some people, but we actually get to see him as the Peter Parker, the Spider-Man that the comic books have very well established him as, especially when he moves into this crappy apartment in New York and just hoping that like his friends and his girlfriend just go off to Boston and live a better life without the dangers of Spider-Man. I'm pretty sure that the results of this movie won't constantly be a complete downer for the future movies. I mean, if they're going to bring them back, we can wait another movie. This movie was long enough as it is, which is a crazy part because this movie really moved fast for a 2.5-hour movie. And if Tom Holland does stick with the MCU and decides to do another Spider-Man trilogy, I think it's a perfect opportunity to bring in his version of Gwen Stacy as well as Harry Osborn. I mean, everyone's talking about how they want Timothée Chalamet to take on that role, and I think he'd be perfect. There's even talks about Sony wanting to revive Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man saga, and that would be very, very cool. And I haven't seen Hawkeye yet on Disney+, but everyone's talking about how the ending of Spider-Man No Way Home might cross over with the Hawkeye finale, which would probably make sense with the rumors of Kingpin coming in, played by Vincent D'Onofrio. I mean, we already had Matt Murdock from the Netflix series show up. It would only make sense that they would tie in those stories. Let's go ahead and end this video with talk about the post-credits. So the first post-credit scene is Tom Hardy showing up and he's getting drunk at a cantina. And I'm like hoping that Venom was going to finally meet our Tom Holland Spider-Man. And it was a little bit of a slap in the face because when they fix things in the ending of No Way Home, he ends up getting blipped back to his universe. And then a little piece of the symbiote still remains in Tom Holland's Spider-Man universe, so there could be a possibility that we could get the black suit, because that black suit that we got early on in the movie, I didn't realize that it was just flipped inside out just to have that black effect. And for the second post-credits scene, we get a teaser trailer for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which is something that I haven't seen since Captain America the First Avenger, where we get the teaser trailer for, the first official team up of the Avengers. And it was insane. It's just some of the footage, and it is definitely canoned WandaVision and Loki. Like, those two TV shows on Disney Plus have become canon to this movie. It is insane. And I love to see Scarlet Witch and her original getup and her teaming up with Doctor Strange and them just going through the craziness of what to expect with all the consequences that have happened with all these movies so far. This has set up the MCU movies for the next 15 years for sure, because this whole multiverse thing is just going to get a lot crazier, and Doctor Strange footage definitely proves that, especially when he sees his evil self. Like, does that make the animated TV show What If canon? Alright, guys, that's all I can say and all I should say about the movie. I mean, surely there are a lot of things that we could break down and go into depth with, but you know what? That's what the comment section below is all about. If there's something that I glossed over, or if there is more details to some of the topics that I brought up that you guys want to discuss, please let's have a conversation about it, because that's what makes this movie so great. Please, guys, do yourselves a favor. Go check it out if you haven't seen it already. Go check it out if you've already seen it once, maybe twice. Just, this movie needs your support. And maybe we'll get the movies for Spider-Man and for future Spider-Man movies that we want to get. I mean, hell, I'm very much looking forward to Spider-Man Across the Universe Part 1. Yeah, they're splitting that one into 2. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Happy holidays. I'm Jaren Agbanawag, and I will see you guys at the movies. Take care. Bye.
Now you may try to subtract it, but it just won't go away. 3 times 1.
What is it? 1, 2, 3.
That's a magic number.